Our story kicks off with a breathtaking view of a wyvern soaring through the skies. Without a care in the world, the creature dives at incredible speed toward the ground. Its freedom is absolute, more than any person could ever dream of. Just then, we see our protagonist, covered in blood, watching the monster's flight with a determined gaze. This very sight was the reason why he, a member of the great magical house of Daculin, had decided to retire from his old life. With a clenched fist, he affirms that this was his one and only reason to stop. The scene then shifts, and we find our protagonist facing an opponent in a dark, gloomy place. His enemy accuses him of hiding his true abilities this whole time, but our guy just smirks while activating a magic circle. He coolly states that from now on, he'll be the one asking the questions. The protagonist then holds up a book, asking if it's a grimoire. Barely conscious, the man on the ground confirms it is. He then asks if our hero really thought so many men were sent just to hunt down a mere hunting dog. Realizing they were after the grimoire, our protagonist asks how to use it, but surprisingly, the man has no idea. Our MC then thinks to himself that if the Daculins knew the true power of this grimoire, they would have never just stored it away. And yet, even without knowing how to use it, they still came after the item. The enemy then orders our protagonist to hand over the grimoire right that instant. He promises that if he does, he can return to his old post, but the young man just scoffs at the offer. He asks if a mere administrator would really have that kind of power. In the next moment, he lifts the man into the air with his magic and asks for his last words. Suddenly, a menacing presence with a terrifying aura appears out of nowhere. Sensing the threat, our guy is completely stunned. His instincts immediately scream at him that this newcomer is extremely dangerous. The mysterious figure remarks that the boy has good instincts for noticing his presence, and that, he adds, is very interesting indeed. With a smile, he introduces himself as Farron von Daculin, the leader of House Daculin. Farron says he wants the grimoire, and our boy, shocked, thinks to himself that this is the first time he's ever seen the head of the house in person. House Daculin is known as the greatest magical family on the eastern continent. The young man wonders what kind of mage Farron truly is. He recalls that Farron is renowned as the strongest in the family's entire history. With a sigh, our hero remarks that this whole situation is in really poor taste. Farron, however, doesn't seem to understand the boy's reaction. So he asks if the master really expects to get something he fought tooth and nail for free, calling him shameless. The family leader just lets out a laugh at the boy's audacity. The two then stare each other down as a tense atmosphere hangs in the air. In his thoughts, our hero regrets wasting so much time with the wyvern, cursing his luck that the head of the family himself had to show up. He can feel that Farron's presence is no joke. He's without a doubt the strongest mage he has ever seen. Farron states that it would be easier to just finish him off and take the book, but he decides to get straight to the point. He invites him to return to House Daculin, promising that if he hands over the grimoire, all will be forgiven. The master then praises his talent, lamenting that he hadn't noticed him sooner. Even though he was just a vagrant from a poor district, he managed to reach an incredible level. So Farron asks how far could he go with the full support of House Daculin, and how high could he soar if he were to become the family's blade. He then invites the young man to grow with them and make House Daculin even greater. To do that, he would have to return the grimoire, and our guy remarks that the offer sounds interesting. The family master is pleased with his response and asks for the grimoire, but the protagonist says he has one condition. With a defiant look, he declares that he'll only hand it over if he's given the position of head of the family. Farron's expression darkens, and he becomes utterly furious. Our boy then activates his magic, asking if Farron hadn't been watching his earlier battle. At that moment, the other enemy starts screaming in pain, feeling the crushing power of the magic. He then asks the master how many have already died by this power. Farron finally loses his patience, enraged by the provocation. The master asks if he's going to keep this up, warning him that he could end up dead. The boy looks a bit nervous, but agrees that it's a real possibility. Nevertheless, he charges toward the master and thinks to himself that he wants to confirm if that's really true. A massive shockwave erupts the moment their powers collide. The protagonist screams that you only know the outcome of something once you've compared strengths. Farron's expression turns serious as he says he'll have to put the young man in his place. With that, the head of the house begins to prepare a powerful spell. The family master summons earth magic from the ground, and the protagonist barely manages to block it. Even after the boy's attack, Farron shows not a hint of effort. Seeing such overwhelming power, Our guy thinks this is insane. He's pushed back by the energy, wondering if this is really the power of the head of House Decalon. At this point, he can't see a single opening or weakness in his opponent's defense. Suddenly, he's hit square on by an energy blast that he can barely block. The family leader reminds him of his own words, saying there are some things you know without even comparing. And with that, he demonstrates the enormous power gap between them. The protagonist is left speechless, realizing Fairhorn's overwhelming strength. As he struck, a massive explosion of energy erupts, destroying everything around them. Fairhorn says he held back so as not to kill him and asks if he's ready to talk now. The protagonist then asks what would happen if he just bowed his head, and if he agreed to return to House Decalon, would the master accept him back? But in reality, it was all a bluff. Our protagonist was just buying time to prepare his attack. As he finishes casting his spell, he yells that he would never do that, because he's sick and tired of being treated like a hunting dog, and with that, he unleashes his power. A powerful beam of energy shoots straight toward Fairhorn. He screams that he won't go back to being a dog, because a fancy collar doesn't change a thing. Faced with the young man's defiance, the family leader simply calls him a fool. He then easily blocks the attack. Right after that, a giant magic circle appears, surprising the protagonist, and the master declares that he will show him what true power looks like. Immobilized by the energy, our boy can only lament his situation. In that moment, he remembers why this all started. That day, he had looked up at the sky and saw something that inspired him. It was a wyvern, flying freely and without a single worry in the world. And the reason he looked up to the sky was his own deep desire for freedom. Back in the present, Fairhorn praises the protagonist for holding out for so long. He asks if he's finally felt the difference in their power levels. Our boy admits the gap was enormous, and the master says that now they can continue their conversation. The kid asks if the master wants him to go back to being a doormat, but Fairhorn says that's not it. In fact, he's offering him the position of head of a vassal house, which leaves the protagonist completely surprised. That's because being the head of a Decalon vassal house is a major position, as they wield power that rivals the empire itself. Our boy grabs the grimoire and says this is his real objective. The family leader tells him he's underestimating his own value, as he wants both the grimoire and him. With that, the boy extends his hand to hand over the grimoire, and the master says that was a good decision. Fairhorn reaches out to take the item, saying that with this, all his mistakes will be forgiven. But just as he's about to grab the book, the protagonist starts burning it with a purple flame. The furious leader demands to know what the hell he's doing now. With a smirk, the protagonist says that if the master doesn't mind, he can have the burnt book. Fairhorn threatens him, saying he won't die peacefully, but the boy tells him to shut up and listen. He reveals he never cared about money, so his reason for taking the book was something else entirely. He then asks if the master knows about the henchman that the young master of Decalon devoured. Fairhorn mutters, "forbidden magic," and the protagonist confirms it, saying he devoured all of his comrades, and Decalon covered it all up. Fairhorn asks if this is all for revenge, but he denies it, explaining that his friends knew the life of a hunting dog was worthless. With a determined look, he says he just wanted to help his comrades, to help them achieve the dreams they so desperately wanted before they were gone. But to do that, he needs a lot of money. And with a smile, he says he's not going back on a leash after finally deciding to retire. The master turns away, saying he heard his last words loud and clear. At that moment, the family leader snaps his fingers. With that, he summons the blue flame, the pride of House Decalon, a flame that never extinguishes. Fairhorn then condemns him to regret his choice within those eternal flames. But even while burning, the protagonist says he regrets nothing. He'd rather go back to his district or even meet his end than be a dog of the Decalon. Amidst the flames, the boy begins to laugh like a maniac. He shouts that he can finally feel a sense of liberation after so long. It's a shame he couldn't escape alive, but he has no regrets, and if he's ever reborn, he will find freedom and get his revenge, unlike in this miserable life. But suddenly, in the midst of the flames, something strange happens, and he's left completely confused. He wonders what's happening, as the flames seem to have frozen around him. He thinks that maybe Fairhorn had frozen them himself. Our hero looks around, completely bewildered by what's going on. Just then, the grimoire in his hand begins to glow, and he realizes the book is the cause of all this. The book then floats into the air and starts to open on its own, releasing a wave of energy. Soon after, a golden magic circle appears on his chest, leaving him even more perplexed. He questions what on earth is happening, as none of this makes any sense. Suddenly, the scene changes, and now he's holding a sack with a coin falling out of it. He looks around and sees himself as a child, wondering how this is possible since he was just dying. Feeling that something is very wrong, he notices his body is that of a child. He wonders where he is as he observes the city around him. The feeling is strangely familiar, as if he has gone back in time. With a jolt, he suddenly remembers everything. This is the black and white district, the place where he used to beg for scraps every single day. He then wonders if, by some chance, he was sent back in time. He stops by a sewer, completely unable to understand what just happened. Seeing his reflection in the water, he confirms that it's him, but much younger. The only clue he has is the fire-like mark that remained on his chest. He's not sure of anything, but the grimoire must be responsible for all of this. He questions the book's power, remembering that the head of Declan himself came for it. But for now, he simply accepts it, deciding he knows nothing for the time being. This feels too real to be a dream, and from the smell of the sewer, he's sure he's alive. And he's not just alive, he feels completely renewed. He's now full of energy and feels like anything he does will turn out right. However, he wonders what turning out right even means. He remembers that he had a big dream. Actually, it was his comrade's dream and the reason he wanted to retire. He then remembers his companion, and it's revealed that the protagonist's name is Aster. His friend had said that as vagrants, they couldn't dress, eat, or learn properly. He had asked which of these was the most painful, and Aster had answered that it was not being able to eat. The protagonist's friend reveals that their greatest sorrow was not being able to learn, because if they had studied, they wouldn't have been captured by those nobles. After that, Aster remembers what his friend said, that he would build a grand library for everyone. It would be a place where anyone could read books freely, regardless of their status or money. But now, our protagonist wants to take that dream a step further. He decides to build a tower with all kinds of books because he happens to like high places. With a mischievous grin, he plans to put the secret techniques of the Deculan right at the entrance, so that all sorts of people can read the secrets they value so much. Just imagining the scene makes his mouth water. The only problem is how he's going to get his hands on all those secret techniques. He then decides that's a problem for his future self to solve. Suddenly, while he's distracted, a kick lands squarely on his face. Lying on the ground, he sees a blonde boy who had been looking all over for him. The boy kicks him relentlessly, yelling that he told him to stay put. Our hero wonders who this guy is that just attacked him out of nowhere. But being a veteran, he manages to stop the kick with ease. The blonde kid is surprised, and our hero says that he hit him 7 times. So, he declares he'll round the number of hits up to 10 and return them all. The attacker is terrified by the young man's sudden change in attitude. Just then, Aster throws a punch, but he ends up hearing the sound of something breaking. He then starts looking at his own hand, not understanding what just happened. The attacker calls him little brother and lands a punch right in his face. He continues to beat up our hero, calling him crazy for fighting back. The physical pain is nothing compared to the pain he feels in his heart. The attacker ends up tripping on a rock and falls right into the sewer. Aster then realizes this is his chance to escape. Meanwhile, the blonde boy spits out the filthy water, completely disgusted. The attacker tells him to stop, but our guy just ignores him. And as he leaves, he looks back and says this is a strategic retreat, and that he'll keep the 57 beatings in his heart because he's a man who never gives up. Alone in an alley, he sits down and thinks that the situation is really serious. He looks at his bruised wrist and realizes just how weak this body is. At that moment, he gives up on the idea of the tower and decides he needs to strengthen his body first. Someone then says they're hungry, surprising Aster. A mysterious boy starts staring at the protagonist. Aster asks if the boy knows him, and he says no. At that, our guy thinks to himself that he figured the little kid wouldn't know him. He analyzes the boy and notices that despite being dirty, his clothes are expensive, which means he's a walking time bomb. The little boy introduces himself as Damien and says their mother's name is Bianca, leaving our hero shocked. Annoyed, our hero asks if the kid has any brains in his head. The little boy then replies that he doesn't have a mother and apologizes for the confusion. With that, our guy says he doesn't have a father either, and it's best if they each go their own way. However, despite saying that, the boy just stood there, staring at him. Noticing the kid isn't moving, he asks if he's not going to leave, but the young boy says he'll go with him. At that moment, he thinks about punching the kid, but restrains himself and just tells him to get lost. But the white-haired boy ignores the warning and extends his hand toward Aster. Then, a magic circle appears, and the young boy says he's going to heal our hero. Our guy is astonished, as he never expected the young boy to use magic on him. With a smile, the little kid reveals that this is the technique known as healing hands. However, our hero immediately realizes that this isn't just a simple healing spell. He recognizes it as the Light of Healing, a secret technique of the noble House Blando, which had been annihilated. His veteran instincts go wild in his head, signaling grave danger, and that he has just gotten himself involved in something extremely messy and dangerous. He then wonders what a child from House Blando is doing in a district like this, and starts whispering the boy's name, trying to remember who he is. The little boy is completely confused, and asks if he had called him. Aster is completely shocked and says that now he remembers everything. He recalls a person from House Blando who had different colored eyes. This person was known as the Monster of House Blando, and was a fearsome being. He was the Mad Butcher who wouldn't die, Damien von Blando. But the boy in front of him seemed completely different from the monster he knew. Our protagonist can't believe they are the same person. He then remembers when he was a problem solver before his regression. His comrades were complaining about a call from House Blando while he just listened. One friend says he heard about a monster there that took dozens of lives. The other comrade wonders if it was an ogre or something of the sort. Then our hero remembers the scene he saw that day and is horrified. In front of them, there was no ogre. He saw an out-of-control human causing a massive carnage in his path. He was using his family's recovery magic to keep fighting non-stop. That was the Monster of House Blando, the Mad Butcher who couldn't be killed, known as Damien von Blando. But the little boy in front of him didn't seem to have an ounce of malice. The protagonist can't believe that the monster he once knew is this very boy. He wonders why the sole heir of the powerful House Blando would be here. Suddenly, the boy stands up and shouts about food, leaving our hero confused. The young boy says his mother told him that eating well prevents injuries, so they should eat. Agreeing with the logic, Aster asks if he has any money. Damien then shows a bag full of gold coins. Seeing the cash, our hero's attitude completely changes, and he puts his arm around the boy's shoulder. He declares that from now on they are friends, leaving the boy surprised. The protagonist explains that friends share things. With that, the new friends head out excitedly to fill their bellies and spend the money. Watching the sunset, Damien thinks that he's finally made a real friend. With a full stomach, our hero relaxes on the bed and says the food was delicious. He then turns and sees Damien looking around and asks what he's doing. The little boy says he didn't know there was a house here, as he always slept outside. He then climbs onto the bed and says that he doesn't have a father either, as if he were competing. The two then start to bicker. To end the silly fight, Aster asks if the boy has a mother and where she is. Damien says she's not here, and Aster decides to get a better handle on the situation. He then asks how long the boy has been alone, and Damien says he slept 10 times. Our hero concludes it's been 10 days and wonders if he ran away or is being pursued. But the white-haired boy surprises him by saying he's also very good at taking naps. He explains he can sleep twice a day, and in total, he has slept 10 times since he ran away. Our hero concludes it's only been 3 or 4 days, and the boy complains about the uncomfortable ground. The protagonist stays silent for a moment, and after that, he starts staring at the bed. He dives headfirst into it, thinking that madmen are different from the very beginning. But he decides that babysitting the kid and befriending House Blando isn't a bad idea. It will help him against the Decalin, and noble houses also have plenty of books for his tower. But before that, he needs to settle the grudge from the 57 beatings he took. He then tells Damien that he's going to lie down and that something big will happen if he disturbs him. The little boy asks if he's going to do breathing exercises, and the protagonist confirms it. Lying down, he remembers that his magic in his past life had many limitations. That's why he had to break into several noble houses to steal their secret techniques. He was almost caught and killed on several occasions while seeking more power. Through these thefts, he learned the rigid body technique used by knights, as well as others like spiritual arts, summoning, alchemy, and various other techniques. But the power he encountered just before his death was on another level entirely. That was a truly catastrophic force that he couldn't overcome. That's why this time, he would use magic again to achieve his goal. The technique he's going to learn is the Celestial Origin Art from House Nepal, which absorbs any mana. With a smile, he thinks that he'll finally use what he memorized for his research. He then begins the breathing technique, and a red energy starts to flow from his body. Suddenly, he feels an intense pain, as if lava were coursing through his veins. He tries to concentrate to operate the Celestial Origin Art, but something surprises him. Our hero notices impurities leaving his body and doesn't understand why. He remembers that normally, a high-level mage performs a purification ritual on young nobles. The secret technique pushes mana to burn away the impurities accumulated in the circuits. This process is known as a mana bath and serves to completely cleanse the body. The purification causes immense pain and the boy screams, feeling everything burn inside him. When the process ends, he sits up in bed and wonders how much time has passed. He looks to the side and sees his new friend Damien sleeping peacefully on the other bed. Our hero notices there are no more impurities in his circuits, and his mana has been purified. This purity might even surpass what he had in his past life, but even so, he hesitates. He then questions if he could defeat Decalen, even if he were reborn 100 times. However, one thing is certain, he needs to get stronger. He says he's a problem solver who doesn't give up, and the possibility of winning has just increased. The next morning, Damien was impressed. It's young Damien who is surprised to see that his hair is now brown. Our hero had dyed his friend's platinum hair so that House Blanda wouldn't find them. With a hat on his head, the little boy asks his new friend what they'll do now. Our hero just stares at him with a serious look. With a smile, he reveals that now they are going to beat up a certain person. Meanwhile, the attacker who had assaulted him before is stretching, unaware of what awaits him. The blonde boy says he slept well and that it's a beautiful day to start. Suddenly, he notices two people approaching and ends up recognizing the protagonist, asking if that isn't his little brother. The attacker yells, asking where he's been and why he looks so clean. Without a word, Aster lands a punch right in the middle of his stomach. Lying on the ground, the attacker hears our hero say that he came to the right place. With a menacing look, he says the blonde kid owes him 123 beatings. The attacker's friends, seeing this, don't understand what the hell is happening. Suddenly, an entire gang appears, and everyone is stunned to see the boy they used to bully. With a sinister smile, our hero recognizes all the familiar faces there. He wonders how far he can go today, while Damien questions if this is some kind of game. Without wasting any time, our hero lands a powerful punch on one of the gang members. Right after that, he delivers a blow to another boy's stomach, sending him flying. The assault continues with a powerful strike to another attacker's head without any mercy. Meanwhile, Damien watches, impressed as his new friend takes on all the bullies by himself. The little boy notices that he's wrapping his fists in mana to deliver non-stop blows. With his eyes shining with admiration, Damien thinks it's incredible. Our hero teaches him that in moments like these, he should say the scene is sick. Enthusiastically, the little boy repeats that the scene is indeed very sick. But Damien gets confused when he sees one of the boys lying on the ground in pain. He approaches and uses his healing magic on the attacker, saying he shouldn't get hurt. The bully thanks him for the healing, but it wasn't over yet. With a wicked smile, Aster grabs the bully and asks how many punches he's taken so far. After a while, all the attackers are down on the ground, and our hero is exhausted. He hits another bully in the back and wonders how many blows he's delivered so far. The attacker on the ground says he lost count. He then turns to Damien and calls him over to help, making the little boy very excited. The bully is terrified and begs them to stop as the healing game begins. Our hero warns him that he still owes him beatings, and Damien starts healing him so the torture can continue. In the end, the entire gang lines up and thanks the protagonist for a job well done. Satisfied, our hero says it was a very disciplined session and that he feels proud. One of the attackers then calls for our protagonist's attention, a little fearfully. The bruised attacker asks if they can leave now, as they've been beaten enough. He explains that this place is their home and asks if our boy wants them to disappear. With a menacing look, Aster says that's a problem, and the bully despairs. The gang then leaves, and our boy watches them go, thinking that this is no longer about a grudge. He realizes the situation has become really problematic for him to handle. The two friends watch the gang leave when our boy senses something coming from a distance. Aster starts to feel a mysterious aura. Suddenly, a shadowy figure prepares to advance toward them. The protagonist realizes the enemy is fast and has the presence of a solver. He instantly understands that it's a pursuer, most likely after Damien. Aster wonders how he was found, as he thought he had been careful. Our hero analyzes his power and sees that his mana level is too low for a fight. He knows the situation isn't good, but he remembers he's a man who never gives up. Our guy is used to fighting with low mana, so this is nothing new. With that, he starts gathering all his energy and compresses it multiple times. The concentrated mana forms a magic circle on his chest, and he feels it will be enough. With a focused gaze, he prepares to risk everything on a single decisive blow. Knowing he only has one chance, he concentrates because he can't afford to miss. However, before he can even fire, the guy simply kneels, leaving the protagonist utterly confused. The mysterious figure who landed is actually a butler, desperately shouting for the young master. The little boy is shocked and recognizes the man, calling him Alfredo. The butler grabs him, crying, and says he looked for him everywhere, unable to sleep. The boy tries to break free, but the butler refuses to let him go and holds him even tighter. Our hero realizes that the so-called family escape was just a typical case of running away from home. The butler notices our hero and apologizes for the scene in front of a guest. Then Alfredo introduces himself as the butler of House Blando, and our hero says his name is Aster. The butler comments that the young master seems to like him very much and invites him to the family's estate. Our protagonist is surprised by the sudden invitation to House Blando. He finds the invitation strange, as nobles usually despise the poor, and he can't read the butler's intentions. However, he doesn't mind, since he was already planning to build ties with House Blando anyway. He thinks that the estate is on the way to Xinyan Academy, which has the best library in the East. The boy then accepts the proposal, and the butler says he will arrange a carriage for them. This is a detour from his library plan, but he thinks it's a good one. After that, he gets dressed and prepares to see if the food at House Blando is actually decent. The carriage finally arrives at a massive gate, and Alfredo announces that they have reached House Blando. Our hero then steps out of the carriage. He wonders if this is his first time officially visiting the place. He stares at the enormous mansion of House Blando, with servants lined up at the entrance. Alfredo says it's getting late and asks a maid named Rancy to take care of them. The maid then glares at the little boy with a sinister look and tells him to follow her. The young master is terrified and calls out the maid's name, afraid of what's to come. Inside the mansion, Alfredo walks alone down the corridor. He then stops in front of a large door and knocks twice to announce his presence. A voice tells him to enter, and the butler steps into the room. The woman in the room asks where Damien is, and Alfredo says he found him in the 7th district. The butler reports to the woman, who appears to be the head of House Blando. Upon hearing the report, the madam casts a spell against Alfredo. The furious woman had conjured a red magic circle. Completely beside herself, she worriedly asks if anything happened to her son. Calmly, the butler asks the madam to calm down and listen to what he has to say. After hearing everything, the woman calms down and sits in her chair, saying she understands. Relieved, she dispels the magic circle and expresses her gratitude that everything turned out okay. The butler thinks it was lucky for everyone, because if the young master had been hurt, they would have all been in deep trouble. After all, who could stop the fury of the madam, once known as the Blood Witch? But when it comes to her son, her eyes soften, and she thanks the butler for his work. He says it was his duty, but that he has an unusual matter to discuss with her. Curious, the woman asks what kind of unusual matter he wants to discuss. The butler then talks about the new friend the young master made, named Aster. Alfredo reveals that the boy sensed his presence and was ready to attack before he even showed himself. He remembers that when they faced each other, the boy had something in his hand, and that thing was a mana bullet, a technique that requires incredible control. The madam finds it impressive for a child from that district to have such talent. It is for this very reason that Alfredo is telling all of this to his madam. The butler, with a serious face, asks if he can make a request. The scene changes to another location, and Alfredo starts looking for Aster. Suddenly, he opens his arms and asks the boy to become his successor. At this, our protagonist is completely shocked by the butler's request, but the butler is confident, thinking he would never refuse such a great honor. To Alfredo's surprise, our boy simply refuses. The butler is bewildered and asks if he's serious. Aster, with a bored expression, asks if he must have misheard. Seeing the young man's reaction, the butler becomes even more perplexed by the situation. He can't believe that a commoner is refusing such a good offer. The protagonist maintains the same look of disinterest and doesn't change his mind. Suddenly, little Damien appears and asks why he said that. Our hero grabs the little boy and says he prefers things as they are now. Seeing the scene, Alfredo seems to understand what's happening. The butler says he understands the refusal, as the young man knows his own worth. The butler then says that the world is vast and full of unknown dangers. But our hero replies that he knows the world isn't as small as he thinks. Alfredo continues, saying the young man must feel capable of conquering everything. However, the protagonist denies it, saying he doesn't feel that way at all. At this point, the butler was about to lose his patience, but he tries to calm himself and mentions a saying about goblins in a ravine. The boy says he's not a goblin, but a wyvern who knows danger. Finally, Alfredo loses his patience. Furious with the boy's audacity, the butler is determined to change his mind. He then says he will personally show the young man what he doesn't know. The butler declares he will show him just how vast and terrifying the world can be. They then go to another location, and Alfredo opens the door to a room. Inside, other butlers look surprised at the scene at the entrance. Then, all the servants bow in respect to the head butler. Alfredo then asks the young man what he thinks of these talents from House Blando. Our hero observes the servants and admits that the family is truly impressive. He thinks it's hard to believe they are teenagers, given how refined they seem. But with a cunning smile, he prepares to give his true opinion. Aster realizes that the servants with arrogant smiles are the so-called goblins. The head butler asks if he will accept the proposal to shine like the others. However, the protagonist turns and says he doesn't like the light, leaving Alfredo confused. At that moment, one of the apprentices raises his hand to call the head butler. Alfredo then turns and asks the apprentice, Winston, what he wants to say. Winston comments that if the boy felt anything, he wouldn't have refused the offer. So the apprentice offers to give our hero a little experience. Alfredo asks if he wants a duel, but Winston says it would just be a sample. The head butler thinks for a moment and decides the idea isn't entirely bad. With a smile, he turns to the young man and proposes a simple duel with Winston. Our protagonist thinks that he knows very well what a nuisance he is to them. Our boy knows that to them, he's just a lucky brat who appeared out of nowhere. So he turns to Alfredo and asks if he can choose his own opponents. Without hesitation, the young man points directly at Winston, who had challenged him. However, he doesn't stop there and points to the other 4 apprentices as well. He declares that he will face all 5 of them at once, leaving everyone shocked. With a sinister smile, he provokes them, saying that if they're scared, they can just die. The head butler is completely stunned by the boy's audacity. However, his expression of shock quickly turns into a smile. He excitedly shouts that this is the attitude that qualifies the young man as his successor. Alfredo then asks if he can bear the consequences of his words. The butler proposes that if he lasts exactly 1 minute, he will win a special gift. Our boy sees through the old man's trap, but accepts the challenge anyway. On the training grounds, a worried servant questions if this isn't too dangerous. But Alfredo says that this stubbornness needs to be broken for the boy to evolve. Meanwhile, the instructor is terrified of what might happen. Damien then asks them to be quiet, leaving the instructor bewildered. Desperate, the man says the boy's friend is in danger and asks for his help. But Damien flashes a bright smile and says he's shocked too. The instructor puts his hand to his face, utterly disappointed by the boy's reaction. The maid warns that if he gets involved, the madam will scold him later. Suddenly, Alfredo loses his patience and tells the instructor to start the duel already. Dejected, he thinks he did his best, but he has no other choice. The maid just watches him in silence, and then she tells Damien that she'll be right back and warns him not to get into trouble. With a mischievous smile, he agrees. In the center of the arena, the instructor prepares to explain the rules of the combat. Our hero interrupts him and suggests a total annihilation duel. The instructor explains that in this format, the fight only ends with one side's surrender. Our protagonist faces his opponents with a very determined look. On the other side, the 5 apprentices were ready for the fight. Winston, annoyed, thinks the protagonist is a brat who thinks he can do anything. As soon as the instructor shouts for the duel to begin, the fight finally starts. In the blink of an eye, Winston is hit square on by a powerful mana blow. The apprentice is shocked and breathless from the overwhelming force of the attack. He can't believe the speed and power that hit him by surprise. In an instant, all 5 apprentices are defeated and fall to the ground. Our protagonist then approaches Winston, who stares at him in terror. He creates mana bullets and says that the smallest peppers are the hottest. Winston recognizes the technique but scoffs at it for being basic and mana inefficient. With a snap of his fingers, our hero warns that one should never judge anyone lightly. He then starts throwing the mana bullets, hitting all the apprentices at the same time. And after taking that blow, Winston is completely surprised. But he didn't have much time to think because the protagonist was already in front of him. Aster then hits him with a punch, sending the poor guy flying. Our boy smiles and says that now he's going to inject all of his experience into them. Desperate, Winston screams that this isn't magic, but a dirty trick. The protagonist replies that it is indeed magic as he prepares to kick. He then lands a kick on another apprentice. The instructor watches everything, completely shocked by the scene he's witnessing. The other servants are also terrified by the demonstration of strength. The beatdown continues without mercy, as the boy humiliates all his opponents. Alfredo then realizes that the mana bullet was compressed at least 4 times. He remembers the attack the young man prepared when they met in the city. The butler is impressed by the boy's natural mana manipulation. On top of that, he recognizes how incredibly well the young man fights in combat. Meanwhile, little Damien creates a magic circle to heal the injured. Suddenly, a female voice calls for Alfredo, sending the butler into a panic. He turns around instantly, recognizing the voice and freezing with fear. To his terror, the madam of House Blando had appeared to see what was happening. The instructor is relieved to see that the madam of the house had arrived. He thinks that the maid Rancy came to save them from this whole mess. The woman then asks what the meaning of this is, and Alfredo says it's just a simple test. With a furious look, she questions if it's really a test, and pointing to the training ground, she asks if he calls this a test. At that moment, she notices her son Damien in the middle of it all, using healing magic. She then orders the apprentices to be cared for and removed from there immediately. Alfredo just bows in silence, accepting his lady's command. Next, the woman tells little Damien to return to his room. She also tells our hero, Aster, to return to his quarters. The head of the house then calls for the instructor, Runpet, who nervously introduces himself. Without further ado, she fires the man, leaving him completely shocked. Later that night, the madam calls for Alfredo, who responds promptly. She says she understands his feelings, but he went too far, and the butler accepts his punishment. However, it seems she has other plans in mind. The madam mentions hearing about the duel and asks if her son helped. Alfredo denies the boy's help, and the madam stares at him, waiting for an answer. With a proud smile, he recalls the fight and says the boy fought very well. He then composes himself and reveals that the protagonist used a mana bullet in the duel. He then reveals that the mana was compressed at least 4 times to increase its power. This shows the incredible level of mana control the protagonist possesses. The woman admits that she didn't show it at the time, but she was quite surprised by the scene. She reflects that subjugating 5 apprentices with a mana bullet is an incredible feat. Next, the madam asks if the young man still refuses to be his successor, and Alfredo confirms it. The woman then says that she now understands the situation, so she decides to reevaluate her judgment and asks for Master Aster to be called. The butler then goes to get our boy and brings him to the madam's room. With a smile, the woman welcomes him and asks him to sit next to her son. The young man asks if she called for him, and the woman confirms it. However, before talking, she places a small box on the coffee table. The woman says she heard Alfredo promised him a gift, surprising the boy. Aster feels a bit awkward as he remembers the butler's promise. He remembers the bet but is surprised that she prepared the prize personally. With a gentle smile, the lady of the house invites him to open the small box, so the young man carefully picks up the small wooden object in his hands. As he opens the box, an intense golden light illuminates his face. Inside, he finds a superior-grade elixir, an extremely rare and valuable item. Suspicious, the young man thinks that such an expensive gift must have a hidden motive. He thinks a medium-grade elixir would be acceptable, but a superior one is highly suspicious. The lady says he should accept it as both an apology and a thank you. The boy then asks if drinking it means he has to join House Blando. With a smile, she replies that there's no such condition. Still suspicious, the protagonist asks if the potion might be poison. The woman once again denies the young man's suspicions. He insists on knowing if there are no strings attached, and she assures him he can accept it without worry. Convinced by her answer, the protagonist thanks her and accepts the gift. With a smile, he thinks it was an unexpected gain and puts the elixir away. But the woman says she has a proposal, and the young man already suspected it was coming. She then calls the protagonist by his name and asks if he would like to go to the academy with Damien. Aster asks about the academy, and she explains her son's situation. The madam reveals that the little boy refused to go, so they postponed it for a year. She says she never expected her son to run away from home like that. That's why she's asking him to accompany him, since Damien likes him, and the boy agrees. Our guy understands that from her perspective, the situation is serious. She fears her son will run away again and doesn't know how to convince him, but he also thinks it's not a bad opportunity to build connections. The young man likes the idea, but feels like he's being swept along by the situation, so he says he'll think about it, and she asks him to let her know later. Before he leaves, the madam says she has another curiosity, and asks why he refused the butler's proposal to be his successor. Our hero averts his gaze for a moment, thinking about how to answer that question. Then, with a small smile, he begins to explain his reason for the refusal. The image of the butler kneeling desperately is what comes to his mind, and Aster says that his knees are very precious to him. The madam is left completely flustered and confused by the boy's unexpected answer. Alfredo, who was eavesdropping on the conversation, is shocked to hear that.